The Cursed Training Runs of Innsbruck. On January 22, 1964, British luger Kazimierz Kajskrzepecki launches himself into another training run on the Olympic track above Innsbruck. He is 53, a former Royal Air Force pilot who has fallen in love with luge late in life. The first Olympic luge competition is only days away, and the world is supposed to see speed and precision, not fear and doubt. But along the icy walls of this narrow chute, officials whisper that the track feels faster and more vicious than anyone expected. On this run, Kay dives into a curve slightly too high. The sled drifts, the steel runners lose their line, and suddenly, he is no longer glued to the track but fighting it. In a blink, the tiny mistake becomes a catastrophic wobble. The sled slams into the wall, ricochets, and fires him out of the groove like a stone from a sling. He hits the ice and hard barriers with brutal force, his body limp as rescuers sprint down the track. Doctors rush him into surgery in Innsbruck, but the fractures to his skull and pelvis are devastating. By the next day, Kajskrzepecki is dead. 3 days later, on January 25th, 19-year-old Australian downhill skier Ross Milne loses control in a high-speed training run and crashes headfirst into a tree. 2 athletes gone before a single medal run, a minute of silence at the opening ceremony, and a question hanging over every start gate. Is the price of these games already too high? The snowcat collision in Les Arcs. On February 22, 1992, Swiss speed skier Nicolas Bogetai sets off with teammates for a casual warm-up run in Les Arcs. Bogetai is 27, a carpenter by trade and a national speed ski champion. That morning, he should have been thinking only about the demonstration event later that day and about how close he is to hurtling past 200 kilometers per hour. Instead, he is gliding down what looks like a harmless public slope, laughing, jumping over a small bump in the snow. Ahead of him, hidden behind that bump, stands a snowcat grooming machine. Its metal frame and jagged tracks sit just out of sight, a hulking shadow on the white hill. Some witnesses will later insist the warning lights and siren are on, others that the machine sits silent and invisible. Bogetai does not see it. He hits the bump at speed, his skis leave the ground, and for a moment he is just a dark silhouette suspended in bright morning air. He lands directly in front of the snowcat. There is no time to brake, no room to turn. The impact is violent and final, a collision between an unprotected human body and tons of steel. When rescuers reach him, Nicolas Bogetai has suffered fatal internal injuries. On the morning of what should have been the fastest day of his life, he dies on a quiet side slope instead, leaving an Olympic village to argue about sirens, safety zones, and whether anyone should ever have been skiing there at all. The crash that didn't kill the Herminator. On February 13, 1998, Austrian star Hermann Maier clicks into his skis at the top of the Nagano Olympic downhill. Maier, the Herminator, has a reputation for fearless, almost reckless aggression, and every camera on the mountain is pointed at him. The course is icy and steep, with compressions that can throw even the best racers off balance. As he pushes out of the start gate, nobody doubts he is fast enough to win gold. The only question is whether he can survive the line he is about to attack. Halfway down, Maier dives into a blind, sweeping turn with terrifying speed. His skis chatter on the ice, he hits a bump, and suddenly the edges no longer hold. The world melts into a blur of blue gates and orange fencing. Maier's body is catapulted into the air, arms and skis flung out like broken wings. For a fraction of a second, he seems to float above the course, suspended over a drop no racer ever wants to see from that angle. Then he slams into the first layer of safety netting, punches through it, hits the next, and rips that apart too. His body disappears in a spray of snow and torn mesh, tumbling deep into the off-piste, far below the racing line. Millions watching on live television have just seen what looks like a fatal crash. Announcers fall silent. Down in the ravine, nothing moves for a few endless seconds. And then, impossibly, Hermann Maier sits up. He adjusts his goggles, stands on shaky legs, and waves to the crowd. He walks away with bruises and strains, but no broken bones. 4 days later, he wins gold in the Super G, and days after that, another gold in the giant slalom. His crash becomes one of the most replayed images in Olympic history, a freeze frame of the split second where everyone thought they had just watched a champion die. Death in the Whistler Ice Tunnel. On February 12, 2010, Georgian luger Nodar Kumaritashvili steps onto the start platform at the Whistler Sliding Center for his final training run. He is 21, born into a family of lugers, and has spent years learning how to read ice and speed. The Whistler track is the fastest ever built, a concrete and steel snake that pushes sliders close to 150 kilometers per hour. Officials insist it is safe. Athletes whisper that it is not. Nodar settles onto his sled, gloved hands grabbing the start handles, eyes locked down the narrow corridor of ice. He rocks once, twice, then explodes forward, sprinting with spikes scraping before dropping flat into the sled's low profile. The walls blur past, every curve comes faster than the last. A fraction of a degree too high or too low will decide whether he hugs the line or fights to stay on it. As he enters the final high-speed turn, his sled drifts up the wall, the tiny misalignment multiplied by the enormous speed. The runners lose grip. The sled snaps sideways, Nodar is thrown out of the safe, invisible groove and slammed violently from wall to wall. In the split second before the exit, centrifugal force rips him completely off the track. He flies over the low outer wall, powerless and weightless, and slams into an exposed steel support pillar beside the finish straight. The impact is catastrophic. His helmet shatters, his body spins and falls, limp on the concrete beside the ice. Medical crews reach him within seconds, fighting to restart his heart. He is airlifted to the local hospital, but the injuries are too severe. At around midday, Nodar Kumaritashvili is pronounced dead. Hours later, under floodlights and fireworks, the opening ceremony of the Vancouver Games still goes ahead. The track is modified, the start lowered, the walls raised. But for those who knew him, every run on that ice from that day forward began the memory of a young Georgian who never came back. The broken spine of Maria Komisarova. On February 15, 2014, Russian ski cross rider Maria Komisarova drops into the training course at Rosa Khutor above Sochi. At 23, she is a home favorite in a sport built on risk. Ski cross is chaos on snow, with jumps, rollers, and banked turns that reward commitment and punish hesitation. Maria has never been one to break early. She charges into a section of steep rollers, knees pumping, torso low, eyes hunting the fastest line. One compression arrives just a little sooner than she expects. Her skis punch into the hollow, the forces spike, and her body is whipped forward. In an instant, the balance between control and disaster tips the wrong way. She is pitched into the air, lands awkwardly, and crumples onto the hard-packed course. This time, she does not bounce back up. Rescuers rush in and quickly realize something is terribly wrong. Maria cannot feel her legs. As they stabilize her spine, she stares up at the gray sky, breathing hard, asking the one question no athlete ever wants to ask: will I walk again? In the nearby medical center, surgeons fight for hours to repair a fractured and dislocated vertebra in the middle of her back. The operation ends with metal and screws holding her spine together. Days later, Maria Komisarova posts from a hospital bed in Munich, telling the world she is paralyzed from the waist down but refusing to surrender hope. The doctors are more cautious. They say a full recovery is almost impossible. Her Olympic dream ends not in a Finnish corral with roaring fans, but in a quiet ward, staring at a ceiling, trying to imagine a life where she has to learn every movement all over again. The team doctor under the groomer. On February 25, 1988, Austrian team doctor Jörg Oberhammer clicks into his skis near the giant slalom course at Nakiska, outside Calgary. At 47, he is not an athlete chasing medals, but a respected knee specialist and the man responsible for keeping Austria's stars healthy. Between the two runs of the men's race, he slips away for a brief ski of his own, weaving down a side section of the mountain in his bright team jacket. The slope is busy with spectators, volunteers, and racers, all moving in different directions. Below him, a snow grooming machine crawls across the hill, its wide metal tiller chewing the snow into a smooth racing surface. Oberhammer drifts into the path of another skier. In the split-second tangle that follows, he loses balance and goes down hard. Momentum slides him directly toward the tracks of the snowcat. The driver cannot stop in time. The massive machine rolls over the fallen doctor, its steel teeth and tracks designed to reshape ice, not spare human bodies. Witnesses watch in horror as rescuers sprint toward the scene, waving frantically for the driver to halt. When the snowcat finally lurches to a stop, Oberhammer lies beneath it. Critically injured, medical staff fight to stabilize him, but the trauma is too severe. Jörg Oberhammer dies on the mountain he came to in order to protect others from injury. As the second run of the giant slalom resumes, some racers ski past the spot, knowing that just beyond the banners and television cameras, a colleague has just lost his life under the very machine meant to make the race safer. The nightmarish luge run in Pyeongchang. On February 13, 2018, American luger Emily Sweeney settles onto her sled at the top of the Olympic track in Pyeongchang for her final run. She is 24, a soldier in the U.S. Army National Guard, and a determined racer who has spent years chasing this moment. The run before has been shaky. She knows she needs a clean, fast descent to climb the standings. Waiting in the cold start house, she can hear the low roar of the crowd and the hollow thunder of sleds echoing up the track. She explodes from the handles and drops into the ice tunnel, quickly reaching speeds that turn the walls into a blur. The notorious Curve 9 is coming, a tricky labyrinth of G-forces that has unsettled even the most experienced sliders. As she enters the turn, the sled starts to oscillate. A small skid to the left becomes a bigger hit to the right. Her shoulders slam into the wall, then the runners bite again, then lose it once more. Within seconds, the sled is no longer slicing smoothly but bouncing from side to side. The forces rip Emily off the optimal line and twist her awkwardly in the sled. Coming out of the curve, the sled breaks away completely. She is thrown sideways, legs and arms flailing, her body slamming into the ice and the sidewalls again and again as she slides down the track. Finally, the wrecked sled and racer grind to a stop, tangled together in the finish area. For a long, terrible moment, she does not move. Officials and medics rush to her, shielding her from cameras and crowd. This time, unlike Vancouver, the outcome is not fatal. Emily Sweeney suffers bruises and a minor spinal fracture, but no permanent paralysis. Her Olympics are over, but she leaves the hospital on her feet. A reminder that, in the Winter Games, the line between heroic speed and life-changing disaster is always no thicker than a blade of steel on ice.